During the 2019 State of the Nation Address, President Cyril Ramaphosa announced that as part of government's reimagined industrial strategy, it would develop several sector master plans to help create conducive conditions for industries to grow. The sugar industry was one of the key sectors identified, and that's how the South African Sugar Value Chain Master Plan 2030 came into being. Joining us now is Advocate Fay Mukaddam, and she is the chairperson of the South African Sugar Association. Welcome, Fay.
Thank you, Susan.
First off, tell us who exactly is SASA and how do you fit into the sugar industry?
Sure, absolutely. So SASA stands for, that's ASASA, stands for the Sugar Association of South Africa. And we are the industry association and regulator for the sugar industry itself. We are a creature of statute, so we have an enabling piece of legislation in terms of the Sugar Act, as well as the Sugar Industry Agreement Act, and that was as amended in 2024. Our members of the association are 3 member associations in turn. They are the SASMA, which is the Millers Association. Then we have the South African Cane Growers Association. And then we've got SAFTA, which is the South African Farmers Development Association. And so we've got 2 grower associations, 1 miller association, and between those 3 associations, they account for all the individuals who operate in the growing and milling and refining part of our value chain, so the production side of the value chain as our member associations. It's a very important industry, specifically as far as the 2 provinces of KwaZulu-Natal and Mpumalanga are concerned. It's a very labor-intensive sector. So we obviously are a huge contributor in terms of the KwaZulu-Natal and Mpumalanga provincial economies, and we are responsible for about 1 million livelihoods in those 2 provinces. We are also an industry which contributes to creating 65,000 direct jobs and indirectly 270,000 jobs. So quite a significant industry specifically for those 2 economies, provincial economies, and then a significant contributor into the national GDP as well.
So clearly it's a very important sector for South Africa. And what are the unique challenges to the sugar industry?
So the sugar industry has very particular challenges, and I think that we just need to draw a picture in terms of context, that sugar is one of the essential commodities globally acknowledged and recognized, and which requires, sometimes the industries globally require certain protections, etc. Because of the strategic nature of our industry and our impact and contribution, economically, as well as from a job creation, employment opportunity creation, etc. The largest challenges that we've faced over the last few years, the first is our strategic trade protection, because we do need trade protection from an import perspective. Otherwise, what you see happening is, if we don't have that protection, you could see cheaper imported sugar landing, and cheaper is not always better, of course. An additional challenge that we're facing is, you would know it as the health promotion levy. That's the sugar tax that was introduced in 2018. And it's something that I'm still grappling with, because you had this tax being introduced without any consultation from the sugar industry. Nobody called us and said, well, what will the impact be? How will this actually unfold, etc. There's this large cohort of, health, sugar's supposed to be bad, etc. And I find that very short-sighted and almost tone deaf in terms of it being a fundamental carbohydrate that is also a great contributor to fueling us as human beings, and certainly our central nervous system. So for me, that discussion is still an ongoing one, and we would welcome an opportunity to sit down with the relevant ministries and all the relevant stakeholders in the market to have an open and honest discussion. Because what happens from a domino perspective is, the minute that you pull out or add additional unnecessary tax onto sugar, then you have a downstream opportunity adverse impact, which obviously affects the economy, it affects the sector in terms of being able to provide additional jobs, etc. What we have seen firsthand is that the domino effect has resulted in 2 of our mills closing down. Now, those mills, the Darnell and the Mzimkhulu mills, are actually anchor economic hubs of activity within a community. So if you drive through those towns now, it's almost like you're driving through ghost towns. So I think that we need to have a larger discussion about, before you just have people, kind of waving red flags without having considered all the research, all the information, and we see what the impact is, then we'll be able to weigh up and see how we better manage and make informed decisions when we're dealing with competing and complex priorities. And this isn't news that I'm delivering now. I mean, there was a NEDLAC commissioned report, I think it was in, I can't remember the exact date, I think it was in 2020. And that report actually outlined what the impact was of the sugar tax and how many jobs were lost. I think it was about 10,000 during the period under review. So, when you have a distorted sense coming through in terms of the noise without having a kind of a tempering view, I think we're really experiencing a lot of challenges. Those are the unique kind of challenges that face us. Obviously, we are also seeing, and this might not be unique to the industry, but we're seeing a rolling set of challenges in terms of the floods that we had dealt with in our 2 provinces, the social unrest where we had a lot of cane lands going up in smoke, and then obviously everybody experienced with lockdown post-COVID, the impact of that, because it was difficult because of social distancing and lockdown. You couldn't really get your cane to the mills, etc. So we've seen how that plays out with terrible, disastrous effects on our industry.
So the industry was not consulted before the sugar tax was implemented, but the industry has worked with government to develop the master plan. Can you tell me a little bit more about the plan?
Absolutely. And I think, if you look at it from an industrial policy perspective, there's a lot of people who are proponents of master plans and a lot of naysayers. But I think what we need to appreciate is that master plans are not a silver bullet. They are not going to resolve everything. But what the master plans do as a concept and a platform is it does bring industry stakeholders together around the table to actually together put your heads together and then try and come up with a solution which is mutually beneficial, or else if we are losing, that the loss is mutually shared and tempered and that it is sustainable. So what happened in 2019, obviously, like I said, the sugar industry itself has been identified as an industry that was under threat and that is a fragile industry and needed additional protection. And so that's why we attracted the attention of government to then say that we could have our own master plan. So the sugar industry master plan was birthed in 2019. And of course, that was just before COVID. So there was a virtual signing in November 2020 of the master plan itself. And all the stakeholders were brought together to say, okay, we've got this challenged industry already, which is already fragile. How do we then, through a task team approach, through certain working groups, etc., how do we distill what some of the key challenges are, what are the impeding factors that we need to take into account before we look at introducing any new strategies, any new interventions, and to make sure that through this, we get to a point where we transform the industry, of course, which is important, and then that our interventions actually contribute to an industry which can become more competitive, can become more efficient and self-sustaining. And so that's what the master plan really did for us. We've just completed phase 1 of the master plan. And, it's had its pros and its cons. The advantage of the master plan and phase 1 of the master plan for us at SASA and for our members has been that we've been able to have everybody in the room and everybody at the table. And so it's not just the production side of the value chain, but also the consumption side, the downstream users, the people, whether it's the beverages guys or the chocolatiers, etc. All of those people were all together on the different governance structures under the cover of the umbrella of the master plan to sit and talk in a lot more detail about what the challenges are. What also came up from phase 1 of the master plan was that we were given space through government support, IDC support, etc. And remember, government support, I'm talking about the Departments of Trade and Industry and Agriculture and Land Reform, Rural Development. We were also given the space to explore some other diversification options, which is something that we're looking towards the future. So in terms of assessing and investigating, looking at phase 1 research, reports that have now been finalized and are available to get us to the point where we can now move to a next phase of considering feasibility studies. So we take phase 1 as really being very helpful for us. Like I said, it didn't respond to everybody's concerns. I don't think we should expect it to. And we really are looking towards phase 2 of the master plan. Obviously, there's a new minister, 2 new ministers in situ, and we're looking forward to working closely with Ministers Tau and Steenhuisen, and looking at a reconfigured phase 2 in terms of the master plan, where the lessons that we've learned from phase 1 will trickle down, where it's going to be a lot more streamlined, a lot more focused. And what we've done is we have made inputs in how we see phase 2 working out on very clear pillars. And those pillars are obviously optimization of the local market, looking at a huge focus in terms of small scale, black small scale growers. We're also looking at defined, diversified opportunities and solutions. And I've mentioned to you that there's been some investigation in terms of that, because that leads us to a sustainable industry. And then also looking at transformation and job creation underpinning all of this. So it would deal with, and obviously the health protection levy and looking at that and food labeling, etc., how we deal with that. So we think that we're on a good path, and we're quite excited. We're just waiting for the trigger event.
Viewers, stay tuned to Plaas TV, because we're going to do a follow-up session with Fay Mukaddam, the chairperson of the South African Sugar Association.